Perhaps at least certain kinds of mad or fanatical people don't desire happiness at all. And as for thinking it desirable, the inference there overlooks the fact that quite ordinary people may desire what they don't value, and therefore don't think desirable, don't think they ought to desire. But let's ignore those difficulties. The step to which I wish to draw attention is the final one, and that one seems to me sound. The thought is also in Aristotle. I can't resist quoting a passage from the Nicomachean Ethics where Aristotle says, anyone undermining this conviction, the conviction that what everyone seeks is good, will not be saying anything more convincing. So universal assent is enough of a proof. Thus, even if it should turn out that Mill's argument in chapter 4 doesn't work as a whole, the sort of proof to which it belongs, appeal to universal assent, is, I propose, a good sort. If that's right, we can give something quite near approval to the argument which has so far appeared in part 1 of Mill's proof, which concludes each person's happiness is a good to that person. Here, seemingly, is a good to means is desirable to. Next, and this is the second stage of this part 1, he infers without ado that the general happiness, therefore, is a good to the aggregate of all persons. But on that inference, I should defer comment until later. I defer it because I now want to propose that the whole of part 1 of Mill's proof, the part encompassed in paragraph 3, is redundant. Mill himself knows very well that this part is not sufficient because it doesn't exclude the view that other things besides happiness are also desirable as ends. The gap is to be filled by the second and longer part of his proof, in which we're to be shown that nothing other than happiness is desirable as an end. But what Mill seems not to notice is that the second part is sufficient on its own, because the first part follows from it, can be inferred from it. It follows because of two further facts. One, no one denies, it would surely be absurd to deny that some things are desirable. And secondly, it's a necessary truth that if anything is desirable, something must be desirable as an end. Thus, if nothing other than happiness is desirable as an end, it follows that happiness itself must be desirable as an end. There's got to be at least one such thing. So now we pass to part 2 of the proof. That runs from paragraph 4 to the end of the chapter, and it proceeds by the same strategy as part 1, namely appeal to universal assent. That I hope will come out. Mill seeks to establish the doctrine that as a matter of psychological fact, no one actually desires anything other than happiness as an end. And when people in apparent contradiction to this doctrine desire for their own sake such things as virtue, that's his main example, and might add perhaps knowledge or freedom of action, then he says they should be seen as desiring those things as parts of happiness. As I said earlier, I shall make no comment on this psychological doctrine. It's attracted many objections, rightly in my view. And Mill himself is worried enough to, rather surprisingly, to subject it to re-examination after he's drawn his conclusion from it in paragraph 9. Moreover, as we've seen, he ends the chapter by leaving this doctrine, as he says, to the consideration of the thoughtful reader. So, even in his mind, it's clearly a difficult.
Russell's view is similar to Mill's view. So, somewhere here we have a problem. It's a contradiction, right? And the result would be that Russell is different from Frege. And since that's a further consequence of this picture, since Russell endorsed a kind of descriptivist view concerning proper names, the consequence will be that is wrong Million's view and Russell's view, and this is what I'm going to try to present.
That one is not correct.
Exactly,
Okay.
the first one, the first assumption, right? Okay. Very shortly, and I'm not going to enter into details because I can present. It's something wrong here, and it's wrong also with the commentators and the followers of Frege. Why? Because connotation and denotation and meaning and denotation, I think this is clearly enough. Meaning and denotation follows very closely the Millian distinction. But the problem is with connotation and denotation and sense and reference and of course meaning and denotation. The problem is with sense and connotation. And that's a problem concerning Frege's interpreters, commentators, and followers. Because not only Kripke, for example, interprets Frege as a descriptivist, but even Frege's followers like Church and Carnap are talking about intentions and extensions. What's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong is that this particular distinction, intention and extension, and also connotation and denotation regards what was called during scholastic times terms. But those terms are our concepts. But if I'm going to say that a sense, a Fregean sense equals a concept, that's totally wrong concerning Frege. Why? And you have the second passage from Frege, where he says very clearly and explicitly that we should not see this distinction between a concept and an object, which is the most fundamental distinction in Frege's system, and the other one, sense and reference, as pertaining to the same field. So we should keep them distinct. That's one thing, and that's